to go. Awesome. So that's good. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this morning. We've got Sarah Howard. I don't know which titles to use, Sarah. There are so many that we could choose. Chair of the British Chamber of Commerce, Chair of Abercroft Leisure, Trustee of Suffolk Academy Trust, and many, many more. So we're going to dive into some of those throughout today, if that's okay. This is an open mic session. I think everybody is PowerPointed to death over Zoom by now this year, so much more relaxed. Please ask questions either in the chat or off on mic as appropriate. So with that, I'm going to hand over to yourself, Sarah, if that's okay, just to sort of introduce yourself to the entire team, and yeah, let's kick off.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I actually sit right on the Suffolk-Essex-Cambridge border. So although I'm a member of Suffolk Chamber, I do a lot in Cambridge and I live in Essex, but don't tell anybody that because I'm supposed to be in Suffolk. I am chair of the British Chambers of Commerce, and before that I was president of Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. I am chair of Abercroft Leisure, which is a large not-for-profit, but mainly works in Suffolk, but has a few bases in Cambridge as well. And in fact, on the national news today, on the BBC News, because we've done a piece about the lockdown and how we need to know when it's finishing and what we can do. And I'm also, as you mentioned, on the board of West Suffolk College and the associated sixth form colleges. And my newest role, I've got two new roles actually. I'm on the board of JNIC, which has developed the Epicentre in Haverhill and some fantastic warehousing along the A14. And my newest role is I am the independent chair of the West Suffolk Systems Alliance group, which is looking at ways of bringing health outcomes up for people in the area to support our ageing population and really get more out of health for people. And so I've brought in education and business into that as well.
Fantastic. So suffice to say, there's quite a few plates that need juggling there. And I would have said that this year has been potentially challenging, given the amount of disruption that everybody's really seen. Being on the successful side of that disruption or the difficult side of that disruption. So obviously your career spans you know, a long period in time. How have you seen things change since you first started business? I know when we spoke previously, you sort of leapt out of a full-time role that was potentially very comfortable, I'm going to guess, into business. You know, that in itself is a massive challenge. It's a massive leap of faith. How have you seen things kind of evolve since you first did that?
I think massively, and I think potentially if I was at the same stage now, I wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't have had the need. But back in the olden days, I was working for JP Morgan in a job I absolutely adored, but it was very, very demanding, very, very long hours. And this was back in the early 90s. And in those times in London, having a family wasn't really a positive thing in business. You had to, I can still remember, to my shame, Friday afternoon and the men in the office not coming out for a drink because they had to get home to their wives, and me thinking, oh, for God's sake, he's had a really long week, let him go for a drink. And that really was the attitude that we had then, and got to the point where wanted to start a family, and really the only way to do that and carry on working was to set up on our own. I could not have carried on working the way I did. And then even when we first started up in business, I used to hide the fact I had children because it was not really seen as a professional thing to do, which sounds ridiculous now, where it really is embraced. Family life is embraced and being a rounded person is embraced. But I remember having meetings or having to leave something. And I say, I've got to go now, I've got another meeting. But in actual fact, I had to go and pick up my child from nursery because she was ill. But I wouldn't admit to that. Whereas now you can fully admit to that. Life has changed enormously. And I think only positively as well.
Agreed. And I think the embrace around the work-life balance has obviously changed as well. To, you know, from my own perspective, doing a very similar thing, leaping out of a full-time role into something that's very unstable in terms of where it's going. You've got direction, you've got product, you've got vision, you've got all these things, but there's still all that X factor missing that every successful business needs. In terms of your work-life balance at home, that must have been very tense time. You're leaping out of a full-time role. You've got children, you've got dependents. You're also a husband-wife team as well, which really, speaking firsthand, you never get a break from work because you'll have that 9 p.m. chat over what you're doing tomorrow. It becomes part of your working day in your life. How did you balance that?
Most of the time, pretty poorly, to be honest. I have a very butterfly brain, and I get bored easily. So to have a lot on the go is better for me. The less I have going on, the less I concentrate, frankly. And it helps that my husband and I are very, very different people. He's a real fantastic techie, geeky person who runs teams really efficiently, all the technical teams, and then I am very much the person side of the business. So we sort of meet in the middle. I think if we were very similar personalities, we'd probably kill each other by now. But it works very well. And I find that my day is not very structured because I will happily start really early in the morning. I can quite often be up and working by 6 o'clock, but then I'll take a big break in the afternoon to go and do something different. It's just the way my brain works, so it really suits me. I know my daughter's working from home. She's an engineer. She has to have that 8 hours when she works. And if she strays out of that, it really stresses her out. But she's incredibly productive for those 8 hours. I find I'm probably very productive, but across a longer period in the day for shorter bursts. And I think that's why I can do what I do, because I have to be able to switch from one role to the next very quickly. And I might be making a call about Abercroft and then going from that to a call with government on behalf of the BCC. And I think it just suits my brain, really.
And I agree as well. That sort of the older you get, the more self-aware you become in terms of how you as an individual operate. And that's really important to understand your own guidelines and work around that, right? You can't force a square peg into a round hole as much as you try.
Yeah, and I'm very careful because I'm aware that I might be working really early. I don't want to send an email at 6 o'clock to somebody and they think, oh my God, she's working, how irritating, I need to do the same. So I'm very careful. I will bank up the emails that I've written that early and I will send them at 9 o'clock. And I won't send emails in the evening because I don't want to put pressure on other people, because equally, if I'm off doing something completely different in the middle of the day, that could be seen as a negative. So I'm not going to force my way of working on other people at all.
Yeah, and I think though, over the last, well, certainly this year, people have become more accommodating around other people's schedules as well, because of the working from home, and we've had to go down this path. You balance your work-life commitment, especially now more so than ever, because yes, you may need 3 hours off in the afternoon because you've got dependents to collect from school and things like that. But that doesn't mean you don't return back to work at 8 in the evening where everything's quietened down for an hour to get those emails finished off. Whereas I totally agree, previously it was, there was a lot of perception around that. In terms of, so leaping out of a full-time role into a startup, huge unknown, massive tornado, work-life balance, all the other things going on. How much did you learn through that period in terms of what you do today? How much grounding did that give you in experience? Because a lot of people don't realize that even if your business doesn't succeed, you've learned so much.
Yeah, I think when people ask me about this whole process, I always recommend that if someone can, they go and get experience first in a big company and have a name behind you. Because I worked for KPMG and JP Morgan a long time ago, but those names stick with you. And to have that big business experience gives me a certain level of confidence in business, and also a really strong, quick work ethic, because you will never work as fast as you work in the city in one of those big banking or accounting institutions. So I brought that experience with me. It was very strange because I went from moaning if my computer wasn't working and potentially just being given a new one to having to go buy my own pencils and paper and start the whole thing again. So I think I kept that work ethic going, and I've always had a really strong view that I have to spend my time well, because I have 3 children, and we got married and set the company up in the same week, and then within the year had our first child, and there's only 18 months between our first 2. So my time was really precious, and I had to use it very, very well. So I was very focused. And I always think that if I'm spending an hour well, that is a good use of my time. If I'm wasting it, then I won't do it again that way. I will look at a different way of doing things. So very precise, asking a lot of questions. That's why I joined the chamber in the first place, because we were a very small startup company. I wanted to know what was going on around here, and to get experience from other people, to learn by what they'd done right, and also by what their mistakes were. So I think not being afraid to ask stupid questions was really important, and building up a network of people around me. And that's how I found my first office space, because we started off working from home. And then obviously with a 2-month-old and a 20-month-old, that was just impossible. We had to move out into an office and then build the business from there. And I found the right place by building up my network. And that's also how we've always found work. We write bespoke software, so it's quite hard to advertise that. You have to understand someone's need, because it's not off the shelf. It's a lot more expensive for starters. So the network has been really important, and all our work has come from word of mouth, by networking and talking and communicating with people.
Yeah, fantastic. And, echo that entirely. I think the other thing as well is, we can't get everything right every time. So there's a degree of experience that comes out of it. You have to fail to learn. In my previous life,
we had a big around about the time my son was born, sort of 2001, we'd done that classic thing you do of a small business. We had one major client who probably accounted for about 80% of our business. We had a team of 8 to 10 people working on it. And we were so busy doing that work, we weren't keeping an eye on the other work coming in and making sure we had work going forward. And the company, we were subcontracting to this company, they lost their client. So overnight, the work disappeared. And suddenly I had all these people with 30% of the work that we had the previous week. And that was a massive wake-up call for us. And that took quite a long time to recover from. And I had the whole learning process. I had to make redundancies. I made them 2 months too late. I should have got on with it and done it immediately. I had the issue of working out how to pay people that I owed money to. And I got all that done. And I started with the smallest first to make sure the small business got supported. And then building up again, we just made sure we were never, ever in that situation again. So that was the biggest mistake we learned, but the biggest lesson we learned. And from then on, we've never had less than 10, or even though we're a small company, 10 or 12 projects on the go, because I'm never going to put myself through that again.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and thank you for being very transparent about that. I mean, it is that much of a learning journey. Going back to what you were saying about, working in large corporate land, if you like, I can't stress that enough. There are so many lessons about business and how business works that you just don't get exposure to in terms of the mechanics. But I think as well, more importantly, you have a different perspective of the business world once you've worked in a large corporate, because not only is the pace different, the conversation is different, but also on top of that, you've got demands and responsibilities. In terms of which leads me on to another question just about the early years, and then we can move on, which was, you're emotionally invested in all of this stuff. There's no escaping it, because you're a husband-wife team and you've got dependents, whether they're children or employees. So you are emotionally invested. How from your perspective, managing your stress levels and managing your emotion actually becomes part of the art of a startup, doesn't it? Is there any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to anybody on the call today? Because
apart from hitting the gin,
apart from hitting the gin, because my GP would argue, and then probably do the same thing.
Yeah. You do, you have to learn to compartmentalize. It's as simple as that, isn't it? Even particularly now when we're working, vast majority of us are, looking at the backgrounds here, they're really all people's homes. You've got to learn to compartmentalize and turn off. I have no magic formula for it, but I don't know. I don't think I manage it that well, to be honest, because my brain's always whirring with one thing or another. But that's just what suits me. But I'm at the moment working from home. We have a home office, but I've been kicked out of that because I'm too noisy. So I've set up office in my daughter's bedroom. Well, I say my daughter's bedroom. She's 24. She's left home. So I've set up office there, and I'm very careful to shut the door on that. And I leave my work laptop and my iPad and my books and everything else in that room and walk away from it. I'm the privileged position to be able to do that, but I think equally if you're working the kitchen table, then you have to just put everything to one side and turn off and decide when you're going to turn off and stick with it. And it sounds really basic, but just go out, get away from it, go for a walk, think about what you're doing and just move on.
And it's also small things that give you a mental break from it as well. It doesn't have to be, grand gestures of escaping for the day out somewhere. It's if you like Sudoku and sit in a corner for 10 minutes and just give your brain something else to think about, that certainly from my perspective has been fun.
It's very easy just to keep going as well, isn't it, at the moment? A week before last, I realised on Wednesday evening I hadn't left the house since Sunday evening because I've been so busy, and every time I looked up it was dark. So I've made a concerted effort since then to take some time out in the middle of the day and go for a walk and just get out of the house, because you need that thinking time, don't you? If you're just working all the time and not thinking, you're not going to develop the next idea. You're not going to come up with ideas for how to run the teams and where to take the business next. If you're just doing the work, you have to set that time up. And for me, I've made it walking time. So I take the dog out and I turn everything off. I don't take my phone with me. I don't even listen to music. I just completely switch off, and that's how I do it. And if I do that for an hour, it means I'm still thinking.
And that's the whole working on the business versus in the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a great segue. I mean, Alistair's just highlighted there are many businesses out there that don't have large company experience, and I completely understand that it's definitely not a one size fits all. For anybody that hasn't got that level of experience, there are some resources out there to help, but also this is where services like the Chamber help connect people to professionals that can give them experience and insights in worlds that they don't necessarily work in. And we've seen that this year. I mean, John's done all sorts throughout the year trying to help businesses, certainly through the COVID, in terms of survival and things. And that's how we end up at sessions like this. Is there anything that you would say to somebody that's started up that hasn't had that large corporate experience? Is there some resources out there that you feel that they would benefit from?
Yeah, I think go back to my point about getting out and talking to people and networking with people. Obviously, it's a different way of doing it at the moment. And I think picking up the phone and asking questions is pretty underused. I get to the end of the day and I've not actually spoken to anyone over the phone. And to ask questions, use your chamber. If you're a member of the Chamber, you can use the team. They've all got very good business experience, and you've got actually people set up to do that. But also network with the other members. You can talk to people who are maybe slightly ahead in their careers than you are, and get insights from them. So I would use that network, and that's what I've done from the very beginning when I joined my local chamber, when we were just the two of us starting out. And that's what I said before, I learned from that, and I built on that and used all the resources that the chamber had to offer me.
Fantastic. There's a question in the chat from Amanda. Amanda, just to make sure I get this right, Sarah, as well as being a celebrated leader, often criticised too much by their peers and others. How do you manage to turn that criticism into a positive? Amanda, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that. You may be on mute, but yeah.
Harley, yes, that's fine. Yeah, I was just really picking up because obviously we all deal with criticism, don't we, from time to time. And I think it's important that we are criticised sometimes because it gives you a bit of a wake-up call, but it can knock you as well. So I was just interested in how Sarah manages that, because I'd imagine with her role, there's always someone in her ear saying, oh, don't do that, as well as having somebody else saying you're doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously the people, the negatives are usually more loud than the people, the positives. And it's just the way of life, isn't it? I think just realising you cannot please everyone all of the time, it's impossible. And just stick with, it's not very scientific, but I believe in the gut feel of things. And if I think what I'm doing is right and what my team is doing right, I will stick with it. But sometimes you do get criticism, and it can come third hand or second hand as well. And I tend to attack it head on. I was doing something recently which was a bit different and a bit new, and a couple of people didn't like it, but they didn't tell me about it. They told somebody else, as people do. So I phoned them up and chatted it through with them, and just, as you say, attack it head on. I think that's the only thing you can do. So low-level criticism can be the toughest to deal with because it's so unfair and inaccurate. And I think you just have to get over it. It's as simple as that. You just have to realise that these people don't understand what's actually going on. If it's a criticism that comes from lack of communication, you can deal with that. If you've got one of the businesses put some info out on their website which was pretty misleading and that got some complaints, but that's fine, and it came to me personally, so it was dealt with. So you've got those constructive criticisms, haven't you, where it's pointing out something that's not been done. The personal criticisms, just get over it. You have to ignore it. It's quite hurtful at first, but the more it happens, it doesn't happen very often, but the more it happens, the more you just think, oh, it's not my fault, they're having a bad day. It's as simple as that, I'm afraid. I've got no magic formula for it.
And that segues into another part, and that's a great question, Amanda, because it tees up the, again, the emotional investment piece earlier on. You were invested in it in a way that in a normal, in a paid role, you're potentially not emotionally invested in quite the same level. So I guess that amplifies that when someone's having, some negativity in the workplace or whatever it is, and being able to tackle it straight on. Amanda, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, not really. I think that's a good response from Sarah, and I think she's right. Yeah, you've just got to grow a thick skin sometimes, haven't you, and accept that we all take criticism sometimes, and it's not easy, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger and all that.
Yeah, and if I'm really rubbish at remembering quotes and stuff, but there's one quote about if you're not being criticised, you're not doing enough, or you're being too safe, something like that. And I think really, if you are going to push forward and change things, you should be attracting criticism because you are changing. So therefore, it's not going to be to everyone's taste.
Yeah, agreed. And on that basis, so as a control freak with a whole bunch of OCDs, I'm talking about myself personally, sorry, just not pushing that up. When you start up a business, one of the real big challenges that you have, and whether you're starting up a business or whether you're in another business, is being able to delegate and responsibly delegate and understand that we have to be interdependent in order to survive and move forwards. That in itself is a very big challenge. Now, at the moment, you've got so many different roles, and this is going to lead on to Ruth's question about your journey through the chamber, but you've got so many roles that you have to be dependent on so many people in those different businesses in order to be successful, not yourself personally, but the businesses as well. How do you balance that? Is that just good teams, or is that, understanding where each person has their benefits?
Well, partly it's necessity because I haven't got time to really delve in and really micromanage people. And that's not my role. Obviously, as a chair, the role is to bring the best out of your teams and to be there to support them, critical friends, and move the business on and bring your own views. I think if I have a skill, it's understanding that I don't know everything and surrounding myself by good people. So I have fantastic teams, and coming from a really small business that, as you say, you're so personally invested in because you've got to feed yourself and also your employees. It's really hard to get to that stage. But if you make sure you've got a good team around, you have to empower them as well. You have to have faith in what they're doing, and you've got to trust what they're doing. And if what members of the team are not doing if the members of the team are not doing what you think they should be doing, you need to work out why and really delve into it.
Absolutely. And again, Alistair's just made a great point. And, you know, when I've run large teams in the past, I've implemented exactly this, which is, again, nobody gets things right. It's having a level of transparency and the ability to fail and acknowledge that you're not going to be persecuted as a result of those failures,
Yeah.
but actually be mentored.
If you set things up so much that you have really, really high expectations all the time, then people aren't going to try things out, are they? They're going to just do what they know, what is safe. You have to enable your teams to go out and make mistakes, and obviously hold them to account insofar as you look at those mistakes, look at why they happened. But for every mistake, there's going to be a positive, isn't there? You've got to try the thing, and if it doesn't work, you learn something from it. So it's giving people enough freedom and enough confidence as well. And as a chair, you have to show faith in your team and support them in that way to give them the confidence to try these different things out and maybe go in a different direction. So as long as I see there's productivity, also you have to get on with your teams, obviously, but you have to maintain that level of distance so that if it is an issue, you can deal with it. So that you're not so friendly that if you have to get tough, you can get tough. And I was in prep for this, I was talking to somebody and they said that, yeah, I'm easy to work with, but they know where the line is. So they know what my expectations are without me being tough about it, but also they know if I get tough, I mean it.
Yeah, 100%. There's a definite line and a balance to that. But likewise as well, you know, I'm going to coin a Malcolm Gladwell phrase, which is apparently an old Yiddish saying, which is, to a worm living in horseradish, the world is horseradish. So you want your teams to be able to vocalize new ways of working and new things that you know, may not have been able to foresee yourself. You know, we're all very subjective and quite myopic at times. So again, giving the people flexibility to be able to vocalize something that may benefit the business is important. But
yeah, and also not asking them to do something you wouldn't do yourself. So not give people impossible tasks, or you know, sometimes you want something said to somebody and you can vocalize it, but you're not going to do it yourself because you know it's going to be difficult. If you're to have that conversation, you can't insist that someone else does. You have to really have faith in what you're saying and what you're asking your people to do, I think.
As well, I think that's great leadership, isn't it? You know, if you're willing to roll up shirt sleeves and dive in and do those roles. And one of the great things about startup land is that you wear so many different hats that it becomes almost impossible for somebody to argue, well, you know, I say almost impossible, but what I mean is if you've been the person that's hit those targets, you've shown that they're achievable. And that's a completely different mindset to just kind of setting those targets without having that substance behind them.
Yeah. And again, it's knowing how to do it without doing it yourself, because you can't micromanage, you can't get really into the operational stuff. That's not my role. My role is I can't say it, but it is the strategic part of the business. So it's knowing what's going on without doing it for people or minutely dissecting what they're doing. So it's about looking at results, isn't it? So it's not, you know, it's something Ruth talks about a lot, about work is done in brains, not in offices. It's not about people sitting in their office for 8 hours and you being sure they've been there. It's looking at what they've produced in the 8 hours or the 4 hours or how long it's taken. I mean, we've talked about that before, haven't we? Around different ways of working. So it's, yeah, having faith and not micromanaging them.
But also as well, that you need strong communication in order to be able to make a lot of those judgment calls without having the customer conversation or the internal dialogue. So again, you know, that's a balance, isn't it? All of this comes down to, you know, when you look at sports teams, to use it as an analogy, right? You know, everybody pulls together, understands their role, and off the back of that isn't overly critical about how the other players have performed necessarily, but at the same time comes together to you know, be a successful team. So this sort of segues nicely. So you've gone through the leap into startup life. Next step, you sort of integrated yourself into the community to understand what's happening and also to learn from other people's experiences. that led you to the chamber, I'm assuming. So how was your journey through the chamber, all the way from joining initially to becoming the chair of the British Chamber?
So as I said, I joined a bit to purely to network, and got involved, and I became chair after about a year, I think, and did a lot of work in the local community, and used my role in business to really make the rest of the community understand how intrinsically important business is to the local community. Place is very important to the chambers, as John will testify. So did a lot of work with that, and was asked to join the Suffolk Chamber Board, not as a rep for Haverhill, but as myself. So I joined that, and then worked through and became chair. And there was a vacancy came up, and doing that, I got involved in national stuff. I went to national assemblies, and I looked at what was going on nationally, because I just found it fascinating. I think that the thing that really interests me with the chamber is this whole grassroots through to government thing. So me as a small business, if I'm involved in the chamber, I can get my voice heard by government. And I think it's a fascinating thing, and I haven't come across anywhere else that does it quite the same way. So then a vacancy came up on the board of the BCC, so I applied. I had to have an interview, my first interview for about 25 years, I think. So that was terrifying. And came onto the board. And at that point, I had no aspirations. I didn't think I'd be in a position to eventually chair. I was just flattered and excited to be on the board. And then the more involved I got in it, the more I could see what we needed to do and where I wanted to take it as a business. Because although we sit in the middle of 53 independently run companies, we are a company as well ourselves, obviously. So I looked at how we need to do things. So I was elected, so I stood for the chair's role. I was vice chair first, and then took over as chair. It's as simple as that, really.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'd agree with you in terms of the chamber is very unique. You know, John has been a fantastic sponsor of all businesses that have been joining both this call and the local business champions this year, in terms of vocalizing what businesses need and where the gaps have been, because often at a government level you haven't got the visibility of, you know, such a diverse audience. So in terms of, you know, managing different boards right now and being involved with those, this year has obviously been a huge flux in terms of being able to be quite so hands-on and sit around a table. And there's an entirely different experience to sitting in a room with somebody than to be remote. How's that balance happened? How have you, you know, both at the chamber level, but also the other businesses that you're involved with, deeply involved with, how have you had to kind of change in order to, not just yourself, but also the entire board to you know, accompany that?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you no matter what you say and however fantastic the tech is, you can't beat sitting in a room together to come up with ideas and to move things forward. And also developing new relationships is completely different, isn't it? If you've got an established team, it's not quite as bad. But I've got one member on the BCC board who hasn't actually attended an in-person meeting. So chairing meetings is a different skill. You have to be able to read the screen instead of read the room. So work out who the quiet people are who you need to bring forward, because as with a room, you always have the people that have to say something, and they potentially have to be the last person to say something, and they say something even if you've got nothing to say. And you have to be just as wary as that when you're on screen. And I tend to try and have everyone in front of me on the video, so I can see if someone wants to come in but is quite reluctant. So to try and bring them in and be a bit more active. And it, frankly, is knackering. It's really hard work to really put that into an hour and bring the whole thing together. And we've lost that, what do people call it, sort of the coffee moment? Is it when you sort of sit and have a chat before you start the meeting? And I think those moments set the tone of meeting quite often. So I'm missing those. And I think if you're new to a business, it must be really, really difficult. So Zoom, although it's a lot better than phone calls in a way, I'm also making sure I'm phoning people and talking to people individually as well.
That's a great tip. Yeah.
You've got to maintain that contact. And, you've probably got members of your team who you've not actually met as well, if they've started since March. So working extra hard, I think, to make those connections and to chat to people. And how I get done what I get done is by meeting people, working out what they need, what makes them tick, and who I can then connect them up to. And to do that on a screen is so much harder. So I'm missing that. It's probably the main things I'm missing. Going to the lunches or the dinners, which aren't all about the flash stuff and the pomp and circumstance. It's about meeting different people and then probably connecting them 6 months later with somebody else. It's like, Ian, I haven't seen Ian for a long time, but I know Ian, and if something comes up I think is relevant to him, I know to go to him. And that's the thing I'm struggling with. So if anyone's got any top tips on how to deal with that, I'll be really interested.
I think it's a lot of conversation is in body language, tone, intonation, all the other pieces. And the other final piece to this as well is it's the post-meeting breakout chats as well. It's all the unintended conversations that actually are the value. I find out yeah.
I know this wasn't in your question, but I'm worried about people's mental health as well. I mean, I'm sat here in a really privileged position because my children have almost left home. So I haven't got to worry about them. I haven't got them calling on me during the day to go and help them with their schoolwork. My house is the size where I've got my own room to work in and I can walk away from that room. And I'm struggling. I'm finding this lockdown much harder than the summer one where I could go out and get some sunshine. So the mental health of the teams concerns me. You can see on someone's face quite often, if you're in a Zoom chat, just who is holding back and who needs a bit of attention and who needs a call after that meeting as well. And it also, it's not just the teams, the leaders as well. All the leaders are under so much pressure at the moment. I think as a chair, or even as a board member, I think it's part of our role to just keep an eye on them and to give them someone to talk to and stand off to, or to make them come out for a dog walk, because you're allowed to do that, and just give them some time. So I think that's been a struggle of this.
And that's a beautiful segue, which is, again, running teams in the past, it'd be the unintended conversation that would actually lead to the fact that you'd find out that there was some turmoil in one of your employees' lives or a colleague, and you were able to help out in however that is. In terms of, from a board perspective, a lot of people look at boards in a way that basically they're super rock solid, they're super stable, there's no emotion there, everybody understands their place and ultimately just executes, where the reality is it couldn't be further from the truth. And we discussed this earlier, which was, Tony Hayward, when BP was having the issues with Deepwater Horizon, and you're waking up every day to being sued in more courts, disrupting more environments, you've got the deaths of workers, of contractors, there's all sorts going on, and people lobbying outside your house. That's hugely stressful. And the outcome of that was that, I think I remember one interview where he said, 3 months in, I just want my life back. So from your perspective as the chair, being able to support the board, both in an emotional sense and chief execs in an emotional sense, would you say that's a large part of the role?
Yeah, I think 80% of a chair's role is outside the meeting.
Right.
It's about the preparation and the running of the business as well. But you think, the leaders that we've got around us who are running businesses which are in trouble through no fault of their own, and so they have no control, and there's nothing worse than having no control over what's going on. And how many times people ask them how they are? How many times they get an opportunity just to vent? And I was on a call the other day, an external call, and it was around boards and how you run them. And one chap, he's like a perfect reasonable chap. I said about supporting the board. I said, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I've never thought about giving my chief exec a ring and just chatting to him." And that's the whole point of us, isn't it? Is there to support them, enable them to build their businesses. And if they're struggling, they can't do that. So I think that's a really important part. Give them someone to yell at as well without any consequences, so they don't go and yell at their teams as well. And let them talk through the stupid ideas and the stupid issues they've got, So they become good ideas and non-issues. And that talking part is really important.
Completely agree. Former MD of mine, we used to chew the cud at 6, 7 o'clock in the evenings. And it would be, I'd walk into his office on one particular occasion and he'd just put in Coke machines, fridges basically with free soft drinks on, for 350 workers. And I walked into the office and he said, I can't believe this. He said, I've put all this stuff in. There's fruit bowls everywhere throughout the entire office now. We've got biscuits and everything else going on. And I've already had people complain. And I said, I bet the complaint was there was no orange juice in the fridge. And he was like, how did you know? And I said, it's because, fundamentally, there's always going to be that small proportion that will find fault in anything you do. And there's that emotional investment as the MD. But yeah, I agree. There's that level of connectivity, but also as well, that's part of being a team, isn't it? Part of being a team is to expose what others perceive as weaknesses and try to turn them into strengths. It's about coming together and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, and if you're a distant leader, you're not going to find out what's going on, are you? Because if you are unapproachable, everyone's going to get on and they're going to stew and they're going to carry on down the wrong path because they can't approach you, and they want to keep their heads down. And so that's not good for the business, is it? And why would you be in business with people if you weren't going to be interested in what was happening in the business and bringing it forward? There's just no point.
And if anybody wants to know, I've got a great anecdote of a CEO that was put under pressure by his employee around a particular scenario. He'd always gone to a conference every year and the CEO had put another event on at the same time. And this guy got up on an open mic and said, I can't believe you've done this. Every year I've gone to this conference, yada, yada. The CEO replied, well, I'm going to that conference this year. Why don't you come on the private jet with me? And the guy's face dropped. He was never expecting that as a response. But on the flip side, you're now thinking, I'm going to be sat in the private jet with the CEO. What the hell am I going to say? So that was an interesting dialogue. But it is about it's about that level of vulnerability, isn't it? It's about being able to expose yourself to the point where, you have to understand your employees and vice versa. There has to be that level of connectivity. I'm just going to segue there slightly, Ruth, just to bring you in on this, because over the last year, we've done many of these HR leadership forums, and I know that at no point has it ever been more important than to understand the mental health, the implications, and also being able to run teams remotely. And this is a drum that you've been banging for an awful long time, so none of this is new to you. Do you have any tips just to add to that?
Yeah, and I've just put a few tips onto the chat actually, and I think this lockdown has been much worse than the last one, and I think some of that is down to the lack of light. So we've got to try and make up for that as individuals. So my top tips are: do the commute. If you're used to doing the commute, do your own commute. So walk around the block, or in the morning, go and pick a paper up from the village shop, or take the dog for a walk, as Sarah's pointed out. I get, at the end of the day, each evening, I get my ski stuff out and I go and sit in the cabin in the garden and I look at stars for an hour. And that's my break between the day. I'm not saying that I don't have a little glass of Prosecco from time to time. Light, as it goes dark, light candles, it's very comforting, isn't it? And it's really, it makes it look pretty. And I think we've got to embrace the darkness and the winter. And we're not very good at doing that in the UK. We tend to we tend to think about getting through, surviving the winter. Whereas if you look at some of the people in the first lockdown that lived through the winter, their own winter lockdown, they got through it much better than we did. So, I mean, what I've been doing is take notice of nature and small things around me, and look for a ray of sunshine. I was talking to John Negus from Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and he takes his dog out every morning really early, and he talks about saying hello to the sun every day. So he watches the sun come up and he says hello to it. And I thought that is absolutely marvellous. And then, you know, treat yourself to some treats like hot baths and pizza nights, and wear lots of clothes rather than putting the heating on. It also saves money. But I think the main thing is be kind to others, and don't be too hard on yourself. And I know that Sarah and I have talked a lot about, you know, these sort of tips and being good to yourself, really.
The other thing as well is you own your own time.
Yeah.
And Hayley made a great point, and I've worked from home for nearly a decade now, and in my former role, I was either traveling or I was at home. So dropping my daughter into school in the morning, picking her up in the afternoon, it's a 5-minute walk, but it changes your perspective slightly. But likewise as well, you own your calendar. You know, part of the challenge that I had previously is there was 42,000 other employees that had access to my calendar. So you'd have to go in and block time out. Otherwise, you would just be back to back for 8 hours a day, sometimes 9, 10 hours a day on Zoom calls. And bearing in mind that it was a global business, so you would be up at 4 a.m. on a call to Asia, and you'd be on a call at 11 in the evening to San Francisco. So you really did have to block out pieces of your calendar. The net of that is that, as Hayley said there, you know, it's getting up in the morning, allowing yourself to start a little bit later. Maybe you do want to go out for a run. I'll be the first to say the weather's so bad at the moment in terms of light that I want to go for a run at 2 to 3 in the afternoon. So I'll just block that time out. Now, that doesn't mean I won't make the time up elsewhere, but the point being is unless you focus on yourself, your own performance is going to drop, and that's going to net impact everything anyway, right?
Yeah, and some people, one of the chief exec in Northeast Chamber, he has told his staff to not book any meetings or book any calls and avoid answering the phone between 12 and 2 every day.
Right.
To give themselves that break, to go outside and actually get some fresh air, because the productivity, you're not going to lose 2 hours productivity, are you? You're going to gain massively. And if you're going to work slightly later when it's dark, or start slightly earlier, then that makes perfect sense to actually get out and have that break and give yourself some time.
But I think as well, just to add to that, that walk with no other distractions means you get to connect the dots together in your head in a more coherent fashion than when you're in the trenches working hard. How many times would you have said that's led to time saving? It's led to shifts in perspective. It's led to new ideas that have circumnavigated something that would have been much more of a time vampire.
Yeah, we had an issue a couple of years ago in one of the businesses I work with, where we were growing but couldn't really. The chief exec couldn't justify financially employing somebody else in a leadership role, but we as a board encouraged him to take somebody on because he was working at such capacity, he had no brain space. So he was doing all the time. He wasn't going away and thinking about things, and he wasn't growing the business. And so we got a new strategic director in who was amazing, and it freed him up, and he was able to push forward the business in the direction he wanted to go. So that initial cost actually made us money. But it's hard to have the guts to do that sometimes, particularly in the current climate where you are worried about the bottom line all the time. But you can't work at capacity all the time. It's just not sensible. It's not the way to grow your business. You need to give yourself time off. And that doesn't mean time off as in the evenings. It means time off during the day when you're in that workspace, headspace, if that makes any sense at all, sorry, to yourself to think about it and think about what the next steps are. And I don't think about my dog walk in the middle of the day as time off. I think as thinking time. I schedule that as my time to think, and I used to use it. I used to go swimming a couple of times a week, and I used to struggle with swimming because I used to get so bored. I could manage maybe about 20 lengths, but I got myself to a point where I'd think, right, I need to think about that. I will do that when I go swimming. And doing that very, very slowly, I could do 50, 60 lengths while I was thinking about it, and then go back to the office and then work on what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, likewise, I'll be the first to say that when I go running, I can't think about anything other than keeping one foot in front of the other and my breathing under some kind of control. So that's quite beneficial. I'm going to just pull back to the beginning because we live in a world today of diversity and inclusion and equality, never more so than ever before. Obviously, being highly successful as you are from a career perspective, you didn't have the luxury of the diversity and inclusion and equality that is available today. That, I'm sure, brought up some challenges. You've spoken about the fact that you know, talking about the fact that you had children was really difficult and not viewed in a positive manner. Just as sort of an appraisal of that to everybody on the call, especially anybody at the moment that's feeling as though they've got some adversity in their life around their careers and various other things. What would your message be to them?
Just do it. Sorry, that sounds so basic, but I quite often will talk to people that want to get on and want to try different things, and the only thing holding them back is themselves. And yes, there is discrimination, I get that, but the only way to do it is just work your way through it. Sorry, that's not really very mind-blowing, is it? But I've always said yes and then worried about how I'm going to do it afterwards. And that's worked for me. And I have now had to start learning how to say no, because I've got to capacity now, but I'm still quite careful how I use no. And it's a female thing as well, I have to admit. A lot of situations, like going for jobs, if a man fulfills 60% of the criteria, he'll go for the job. Most women will only do it if they fulfill 100% of the criteria. So it's getting into that mindset of just being a bit more flexible and not so much of a perfectionist, and also being willing, we talked about earlier, being willing to fail, take a chance. I applied for a role once that I didn't particularly think I wanted, but it was a really good experience to go through, and I did that and I got the job. Oh, okay. And so therefore I then took it from there. So you have to take your chances, I think, but you need a certain level of security. I understand that you can't go for something mad. So I think starting small, the first thing I did in a non-exec role, if you like, was I became a school governor. And that is an incredibly challenging role. And there aren't enough people in business that do that, and more people should be doing it. But it's an excellent training ground, because you learn how to deal with so many different people. You learn how to deal with difficult board members, because there will be people there who are only there because their son doesn't apparently get the right sort of teaching or something. And then they get in and realise, actually, yes, it's their son, not the school. So you've got people there with one issue. And working with volunteers like that is very challenging. So I think go out and try something like that, because that will only improve your working life. You will learn so much from doing something like that. That will then give you the guts to go on and try something else. I've veered off a bit, haven't I? Sorry. No,
you're fine. I think there's the saying in life that 90% of success is turning up in the first place. Yeah. Right? I think that applies very much to this. There's a question from Jill, which is, so what's next? You've already said you're having to say no now. You've got a completely full agenda. You know, what's next for you, Sarah?
I don't know, is the honest answer. I'm not one for philosophy and stuff, but you know, Tim Minchin, the Australian comedic singer writer, he did a fantastic speech. He went to his old university and was given an honorary degree at his old university. And I watched that, and I watch it every now and again. And he talked about, it's okay to have a plan. I've never had a plan. Things have just kind of happened. And okay to have a plan, but you have to look around you. You have to look for the bright, shiny things on the periphery. And if you are concentrating too much on the plan and the outcome, you're not going to see those bright, shiny things, which are the interesting things and the things that really drive you on and drive you to your next achievement. So I've always got my eye out on the bright, shiny things that are out there on the periphery. And I suppose I've probably got more of a plan now than I ever have done, because I will be chair of the chamber. It's a 3-year term. I think I probably will do 4 years because of this year. So it's going to need more input from me. And I know what I want to achieve on those 3 years. I will then go and do something else, because I'll be involved in chambers there for about 15, 16 years. So it'd be time to do something different. But I think never stop looking for what the next bright, shiny thing is. and see what direction that takes you in. As long as you've got the security of being good at your job, working hard, you know, all those things, then you can afford to look at something different. And that was where the school governor thing came. I had absolutely no confidence when I took that on. I was really pushed to do it because I think they were desperate, as most schools are. And then took that. Sorry, Jill's nodding. He's obviously a school governor. And then I just really enjoyed it. And I just found that the stuff I learned as a governor, and then the stuff I've learned being on the boards of the Chamber and Abercroft, I've learned so much. I've done so much I wouldn't have done if I'd just done my day job. And those things have all fed back into my business and have improved the way I work and have improved my business.
And on that basis, actually, it's an interesting one, because I've always been an advocate that a business plan is a waste of time. A business strategy is far more important, because to predict COVID wouldn't have been in anybody's business plan in 2019. So you need a direction in life. It's always good to have some kind of direction, but as you say, it's a strategy as opposed to a finite path. That's awesome. And so there's one question in here as well, which is, so what was the story behind the MBE?
I think I said towards the beginning that I used the Chamber voice to get business more involved in the community. And I was involved in the initial team to set up a thing called One Haverhill, which was a pilot, a national pilot. We had to bid to government for the money to do it. And it was all about bringing together all the different aspects of the community. So everyone that does stuff in the town. So we brought together education, health, business, local council, 3 tiers of government, voluntary sector, the whole lot together. And we did a project. I got some funding out of DWP, and the deal was that we would give them create 10 new apprenticeships in the first year. We actually did 50. We did 50 the next year as well, and the next year. So it really, really improved people's outcomes. And so that was what I got my MBE for the work I did with One Haverhill, bringing it all together and getting business really embedded in the psyche of the town. And yeah, it was great. I still get a bit embarrassed about it because it's just,
That's fantastic.
Hey, Sarah Hooper from Chatham. It was something I never ever would expect, and you know nothing about it either. You just get this envelope that comes through the post, and so I had this envelope that said, I was like, oh Christ, what have I done? And when you open it, that's the first you know about it. So it's a fantastic thing. And also my town in Haverhill, it wasn't just for me, it was for the town and for the project as well. Yeah. So immense impact on the whole project. So yeah, it was really cool.
And also it's a great demonstration of how how you can make a difference. And I think that's really, really important, that everybody on the call today can make a difference in their own way. And that's great acknowledgement. We're at the top of the hour. I appreciate incredibly time sliced. That hour went very, very quickly, and I could probably sit here for another hour easily. On that basis, do you have anything that you'd like to close out with? I'm assuming you've got other responsibilities that you may need to jump to. We've still got 99% of the participants on the call, which is fantastic. So that shows testament to the conversation today. But is there anything you'd like to wrap up? Is there anything you'd like everybody on the call to take away with them that you think that would aid them in terms of their journey? You've already said just do it. Is that the closing statement we should go away with, do you think?
Yeah, I talk to people. I still find it amazing that people want to listen to what I have to say, because I'm just doing it, and I'm just a normal mum with a normal family, and I'm just getting on with it. And so it's nothing earth-shattering. So I just encourage everybody who wants to do something, who wants to contribute and wants to get involved, that whatever you give in to what you're doing, you're going to get so much more back. So it's totally, totally worth it from a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint as well. I mean, the MBE thing, the project we did, there was one girl who had a terrible life. Really, everything had gone wrong, had gone wrong. And through our project, we got her a job, and it was just as an apprentice, an assistant in a cafe. And through that job, she then went back to college and she got her GCSEs, and she now runs that cafe. So every time I pop in there, I see her, And for me, that encompasses everything I've done. I've improved that girl's life because of what I did with the teams that I worked with. So I said, yeah, just do it. It's so worth it on so many levels.
That's awesome. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to hand over to John just to close out the session, but it's been a great session. I've really appreciated your time.
Thank you. I've quite enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. And after this year, it's a very optimistic session. So that's always great as well. So John, I don't know if you've got any statements you'd like to close out with. I know from your perspective, there's an awful lot going on at the moment in terms of other sessions and Brexit and various things like that. I'm assuming John's still on the call. He may be tied up.
Has he gone off and left me? Hey, John, where are you?
Okay.
He's just put his screen off.
On that basis, there's an awful lot going on at the Chamber at the moment. I would 100% check out their LinkedIn page. There's an awful lot of sessions that are proving valuable to a lot of people. Thank you as always for attending today. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully that's of some value to you. And yeah, thank you very much indeed. We'll share the recording as always. And thanks very much, Sarah. Thank you, Ruth, as well for arranging this.
There's some fantastic comments, Ollie, in the chat that people have really enjoyed this talk, Sarah. So thank you so much. I will save the chat and we'll send it on to you. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
I'm just reading this last one. A most enjoyable and human approach. Much appreciated. How lovely.
Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. And with that, have a fantastic day. Go for a walk. Go do something different. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.